At my husband's will reading, my son-in-law said I was out of the 20 million. He smiled like a man who thought he'd won. But when the lawyer smiled back, everything changed. Charleston, late morning. Light slid through white curtains across the oak table. The room smelled faintly of ink and polished wood. I sat at the end, hands folded, the widow who'd spent 40 years beside the man whose name was on every page. Martin Geller, our attorney and Robert's closest friend, cleared his throat. Before he could begin, Ethan stood. My son-in-law never waited his turn. "Robert wanted things simple," he said. "The estate transfers to Claire and me. We'll handle everything from here." He didn't look at me, only at the checklists in his hand. My daughter Claire sat frozen beside him, eyes on the table, not on her mother. Martin nodded once. "Are you finished, Mr. Hale?" Ethan straightened. "Yes, let's not make this harder than it has to be." He meant for me. The air went still. I felt the weight of every pair of eyes pretending not to stare. I said nothing, not a word, not even when he added, "We'll make sure she's comfortable. Maybe move her somewhere smaller." The word smaller hit harder than I expected. Martin adjusted his glasses. "Well, that's interesting," he said quietly. "Because Mr. Fairchild left one more page." Ethan's grin twitched. "What page?" "The final one, signed, sealed, and notarized 3 days before his passing." Claire finally whispered, "Mother, it's what Dad wanted." Her voice trembled. I almost pitied her. Almost. Martin unfolded the last sheet. The red seal glinted in the noon light. He read aloud, every word deliberate. "To my wife, Lydia Fairchild, I leave controlling interest in all trusts and holdings. This clause supersedes all prior versions." Ethan blinked, as if the words had a weight he couldn't lift. "That can't be real." Martin looked up, steady. "It's recorded, witnessed, and filed." He tried to laugh, but only managed to stutter. I could hear the tick of the wall clock between his breaths. Claire's fingers trembled against her chair. Martin closed the file. "Let's finish the last page." The sound of paper sliding shut filled the silence. Ethan's confidence broke in half. His voice cracked louder than the chair beneath him. You can't just give her everything." I turned slightly toward him. My husband's fortune was on paper. Mine was in memory. He stared back, speechless. Martin rose from his seat, gathered the documents, and nodded to me. I returned the nod. Quiet. Certain. The meeting was over, but no one moved. A glass tipped over, water spilling across the table, half full, trembling under the light. That image stayed with me, because that's what I was. The half they thought they could erase. The half that remained. I stood, smoothing my sleeve. Ethan's face had gone pale. Claire tried to speak, but I didn't stop. He'd spoken enough for all of us. As I reached the door, Martin said softly, "Mrs. Fairchild, Robert wanted you to have peace." I met his gaze. Then he left me exactly what I needed. Outside, the noon air was sharp and clean. Behind me the clock struck 12, echoing like a gavel. That was the day my son-in-law said I was out of $20 million. And the lawyer smiled at me. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't an ending. The door of the law office closed behind us with a heavy click. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the city outside. Charleston at noon, restless and golden. Ethan stepped ahead, his shoes striking the marble floor, too loud, too sure. He turned just before the glass doors, that same smug grin fixed on his face. "Well," he said, stretching the word, "guess you're finally free, Mom." He wanted it to sting. It didn't. I looked straight at him. "I was never yours to free." The grin faltered for half a breath. Then he laughed, shaking his head as if I were some lost relic from another time. "Keep pretending you won, Lydia. The bank will sort it out soon enough." Claire tugged his sleeve. "Ethan, stop!" But he didn't. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You should have stayed quiet. Now everyone knows how desperate you were." He walked away before I could reply, the echo of his shoes scattering down the hallway. The sound faded, but not the insult. For a while I stood there, staring at the brass elevator doors. The reflection in them looked older than I felt, a widow holding silence like a shield. Then, behind me, came another sound, measured steps. Martin Geller. He didn't call my name at first. He just approached quietly, a brown envelope in his hand. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of weight that makes people stop breathing. "Robert asked me to give this to you, alone." He held the envelope between two fingers as though it contained something alive. Beige paper, edges sealed, faint smell of cedar. Robert's handwriting across the front, for Lydia. Only her. Ethan must have heard because he stopped mid-stride and turned. The color drained from his face. "What's that?" he snapped. Martin's tone never changed. "A personal file, not part of the estate." "Then I want to see it." "You're not authorized." Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand twitched like he wanted to snatch it away. But Martin didn't flinch. He was Robert's lawyer, yes, but more than that, his last friend. Claire whispered, "Ethan, please, let's go." He muttered something under his breath and stormed out the doors into the sun. The lobby fell silent again. Martin handed me the file, careful, almost reverent. "He said you'd know when to open it." I looked down at the handwriting, sharp, deliberate strokes I'd seen 1,000 times on grocery lists, on birthday cards, on blueprints. Even now, he was still building something. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated. "A letter, and one instruction." My fingers tightened around the envelope. "Did he tell you what it meant?" Martin's eyes met mine. "No, but he made me promise not to let anyone else touch it." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then the wind from the revolving door brushed past, carrying the faint scent of salt from the harbor. Charleston smelled like the sea waiting for night. I stepped outside, envelope pressed to my chest. The sky had turned the color of copper. Shadows of the courthouse pillars stretched long across the granite steps. From the sidewalk I could see Ethan pacing by his car, gesturing angrily on his phone. When he noticed me, his expression shifted. First confusion, then something closer to fear. He pointed. "What did he give you?" I didn't answer. His voice rose. "You think that changes anything? You think a letter can save you?" I started down the stairs, slow and even. "Maybe not," I said, "but it can remind me who I am." He blinked, uncertain what that meant. I didn't explain. The afternoon wind carried his reply away before it reached me. Martin followed me outside, stopping at the base of the steps. "Mrs. Fairchild," he called softly. He left something else, too, a note inside the envelope. I turned. "For me to read now?" He shook his head. "For you to decide when the time is right." The phrase stayed with me. When the time is right. Ethan's car engine roared and disappeared into the traffic. Claire didn't look back. I stood there, the letter warm in my hands, the sunlight flickering across the seal. Robert's initials, RF, pressed into wax like a heartbeat caught mid-throb. Martin adjusted his tie and nodded politely. "He knew something I didn't," I said quietly. He gave a faint smile. Robert always did. For a moment, I almost asked him to stay, to explain, to give me one straight line in this web of secrets. But then I remembered who I was married to. Robert never gave answers. He left clues. I thanked Martin, tucked the envelope into my bag, and walked down the courthouse steps toward the line of live oaks along Broad Street. The shadows rippled like waves beneath my feet. The envelope felt heavier than it should, not in weight, but in consequence. Whatever Robert left me, it wasn't comfort. It was direction. And as I crossed the street, the bell tower above the old district chimed once, sharp, metallic, final. And in that sound, I heard his promise again. By the time I reached home, the sun had slipped lower over Charleston's rooftops, lights scattered across the porch rail like spilled gold. It used to feel warm. That evening, it only felt foreign. I slid my card into the gate's reader. A single red blink. Declined. I tried again. Same result. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then, quietly, "Fine." The house stood silent. I already knew why. But I did. I stepped inside. The air smelled of salt and lemon oil, Robert's polish on the old stair rail. The answering machine blinked with 3 new messages. I didn't play them. What caught my eye was the faint blue light on my phone. 1 new email. Subject: Estate Transition Notice. Sender: Charleston Mutual Bank. Account access temporarily suspended by estate executor Claire Fairchild. My own daughter. Executor. Frozen assets. For a long second I couldn't feel anything. Then the silence in the house made it worse. I walked to the kitchen. The sink still held the breakfast cup I'd left that morning, half a ring of tea dried at the bottom. The same pattern I'd once teased Robert about. I turned the cup over, rinsed it, and placed it upside down on the rack. One small act I could still control. Then I opened the back door. The yard stretched quiet toward the marsh, heavy with cicada hum. Behind the fence, the old garage waited. Wooden panels warped, lock rusted with salt. Robert's place. His tools, his drafts, his small kingdom of oil and memory. I crossed the yard. Each step kicked up dust and dry leaves. When I reached the door, the padlock stared back at me like an eye. The key was gone. I checked the hooks inside the laundry room. Empty. Checked the side drawer in the pantry. Empty. That was the moment I realized Ethan had been here. He'd taken not just money, but entry. I found the hammer in the shed, its handle still wrapped in Robert's tape, the way he liked his grip firm. I weighed it once in my hand. "They locked me out of numbers," I whispered, "not of memory." The first strike rang loud against metal, the second, louder. By the third, the lock cracked open, coughing out a flake of rust. The door groaned as I pushed it wide. Light poured through the small window, slicing the dust into slow-moving ribbons. It smelled of paint, wood, and time. Everything was still where he'd left it. The pegboard with hanging tools, the blueprints rolled into tubes, the radio half covered by an old rag, and in the corner, a cardboard box with Robert's handwriting, "Keep, Lydia." I knelt down, brushed away the dust, and lifted the lid. Inside were the things he never explained but never threw away. A fountain pen, 2 ledgers, and a sealed envelope the color of bone. His pen. The same one he used to sign every contract, every note, every promise. I turned it in my hand. The weight of it was familiar, solid, balanced. He'd always said a pen is only as good as the hand that dares to use it. The envelope had no name, just one phrase, in his writing again. "Read this where it all began." I didn't know what he meant yet, but I could feel the pulse of purpose returning, the kind that comes right before a storm. Outside, a car slowed in front of the gate. For a moment, I thought Ethan had come back. But it passed. I stayed kneeling on the cold floor, staring at the pen and the letter, as if they might explain what had just happened, how a daughter could freeze her own mother's life with a single click. I took out one of the ledgers. Inside were notes, Robert's handwriting, but not his tone. Dates, account numbers, initials. Then, at the bottom of a page, a simple line drawn in ink. "Addendum confirmed, witnesses filed." The same words Martin had used in the reading. He'd hidden proof here, in the garage all along. I stood up, brushing the dust from my palms. The room seemed smaller, packed with meaning. Robert wasn't leaving me memories. He was leaving me instructions. I locked the garage door from inside this time, slid the broken padlock into my pocket, and walked back toward the house. The sky over Charleston had turned a deep tangerine. The air smelled of marsh and distant rain. Inside, I placed the envelope and pen on the dining table, side by side. Then I took a notepad, wrote one line, and left it under the glass. I was done being polite. The words looked strange in my handwriting, too firm, too sure. But they were true. When I turned off the kitchen light, the reflection in the window showed the garage at the edge of the yard. Dark, sealed, waiting. Somewhere inside, I could still hear the faint echo of that lock breaking, like a pulse reminding me I was alive again. I didn't open the envelope until the house went completely still. The clock struck 9. The marsh outside whispered under the wind. Only then did I sit at Robert's desk, the one he'd built with his own hands. The letter smelled faintly of cedar, like his workshop. I ran my finger along the seal before tearing it open. Inside was a single folded sheet, written in his slanted handwriting, ink, dark and precise. "If they rush you out, follow the ink." That was all. No signature, no date, just that one line. For a moment, I thought it was metaphor. Then I saw something else. Faint smudges near the bottom of the page, as though he'd written more and hidden it. I switched on the brass desk lamp. Its light fell in a narrow circle across the paper. When I tilted the page, a shimmer appeared, thin trails of blue reflecting through the ink. Invisible ink. Robert's favorite game. He used to leave me notes this way when we first married, messages hidden between shopping lists and receipts, revealed only under warmth or light. He always said, "Truth takes patience to see." I reached for the small magnifier from the drawer and leaned closer. Letters began to appear, slow as dawn. 2 words. Floorboard study. I looked down. The floor beneath this desk was oak, old, the grain running toward the window. Robert had laid each plank himself. He used to joke that he left more secrets under this room than above it. Now I believed him. I fetched the small pocket knife from the drawer, the one with his initials carved into the handle, and slid the blade between the seams of the boards. The sound it made was soft at first, then a sharp crack as the plank lifted. Dust rose, catching the lamplight like smoke. Underneath, wrapped in brown paper, was a small metal object, a USB drive, polished silver, engraved with his initials, RF. I held it in my palm, heart steady but loud in my chest. Robert never touched technology unless it meant something. I wiped the dust off, crossed the room, and pulled open the laptop drawer. His old computer still sat there, heavy, quiet, waiting. The screen blinked alive after a slow hum. I plugged in the USB. For a second, nothing happened. Then a single folder appeared. Estate Final Draft PDF. My hand trembled before I clicked it open. Password required. Of course, Robert never left doors unlocked, not even for the truth. I tried our anniversary. Denied. Then our daughter's birthday. Denied again. Finally, I typed the only number that ever mattered to him, the date we bought this house, the one he called our foundation. The screen flashed open. The file was long, dense, pages filled with clauses and revisions, but one line near the top stole my breath. Revised allocation, 100% controlling interest to spouse, Lydia Fairchild. Executor authority limited to oversight only. My throat tightened. Robert had changed everything. He'd locked Ethan and Claire out of power long before his death. I kept scrolling. At the end of the document, a scanned page, Robert's signature beside 2 witnesses I didn't recognize. The notary seal glimmered faintly in digital ink. He'd done it legally, quietly, completely. A chill went through me. Not fear, but realization. This wasn't just a will. It was protection. I heard the floor creak behind me and froze. No one was there. Just the echo of my own pulse. I closed the laptop lid and exhaled. The light from the lamp cast a halo over the desk, over the letter, over the floorboard now resting slightly ajar. I could smell sawdust and old ink. He wrote less in words, more in clues. And every clue led me here. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the inside pocket of my cardigan. Then I wrapped the USB in a handkerchief and placed it inside the teacup on Robert's shelf. He'd never hide something twice in the same place. That's what he always said. But I would. I glanced once more at the line glowing on the screen. Estate Final Draft PDF. The cursor blinked beside it like a heartbeat. Outside, a car door slammed. Headlights swept across the curtains, pausing on the front steps. Ethan again? Or Claire? I turned off the lamp. The room fell into amber shadows. The car moved on. When I turned the lamp back on, the room seemed smaller, but sharper, like truth itself. I picked up Robert's pen from the box and clicked it once. The sound echoed. Its nib still held a trace of blue ink. I tested it on the corner of the envelope. The line flowed smooth, alive. He left me a trail in ink. The thought came as clear as his voice used to be. Robert hadn't just trusted me to find this. He'd trusted me to finish it. The pages on the desk fluttered slightly from the open window. I pressed my hand flat over them to keep them still. The gold light from the lamp deepened, touching the ring on my finger, the one he'd refused to replace, even when time thinned it. I whispered to the empty room, "All right, Robert, I'm following." Then I gathered everything, the letter, the USB, the pen, and placed them into a small leather pouch. Tomorrow, I would go see Martin. But tonight, I stayed there under the yellow light, reading the letter again until the ink felt like a pulse under my fingertips. He'd written fewer words than I expected, but they were enough to turn silence into action. When I finally closed the envelope, the house seemed to exhale with me, and for the first time since the will reading, I felt something closer to purpose than grief. The next morning, I drove into downtown Charleston. The sun glared against the windshield, bouncing off the brass letters of Charleston Mutual Bank. Inside the car, Robert's original trust papers lay neatly on the passenger seat, the same ones with the notary seal still bright red. I parked under the magnolia trees, locked the door, and walked toward the glass entrance. The revolving door hissed softly as it spun me into the cool air of the lobby. A young teller, early 30s, smiled politely. Her badge read Emily, Client Services. "Good morning. How may I help you?" "I'm here about my late husband's estate account," I said. I handed her my ID and the folder. "The name's Fairchild." She typed quickly, eyes fixed on her screen. Seconds passed. Her smile thinned. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Fairchild," she said, keeping her voice light. "You're not on file anymore." I let the words hang in the air. "Not on file?" She nodded. "It looks like the executor changed access permissions last week." Executor. That word again. Claire. I reached into the folder and laid one document flat on the counter. The embossed seal gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Then read this seal, dear." Her hands hesitated before touching the paper. "I understand, but—" She stopped when a man's voice called from behind the counter, "Emily, I'll take this one." A bank manager approached, mid-40s, nervous energy hidden under a rehearsed smile. His tag read, "Mr. Harris, branch manager." He gestured toward his office. "Would you mind stepping in, Mrs. Fairchild?" The walls of his office smelled faintly of new carpet and coffee. He closed the door halfway, then leaned over his desk. "I just spoke with our estate department," he began. "There was an order filed by Executor Claire Hale to temporarily freeze all activity pending review." My fingers stayed still over the document. Review of what? Of estate distribution. I almost laughed. "So my daughter requested a freeze? On her own mother's account?" He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I can't interpret client intentions. I can only follow what's recorded." I reached into my purse and, without looking down, pressed the side button on my phone. A soft beep confirmed the recorder was on. I placed the phone inside my coat pocket, screen facing up. "Mr. Harris," I said quietly, "how long have you been with this bank?" 12 years. So you know procedure?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you know this seal," I tapped the red notary mark on Robert's signature, "is state verified and legally binding, yes?" He swallowed. "I do." "Then please repeat the reason I can't access my account." He blinked. "Because the executor, Claire Hale, filed an order." "Thank you," I smiled. "That's all I needed on record." The way his face froze told me he realized too late what had just happened. I gathered my documents, sliding them back into the folder. When I turned toward the door, Emily was standing outside the glass wall pretending to organize papers, though her eyes stayed fixed on me. As I walked out, the manager followed a few steps. "Mrs. Fairchild," he said quickly, "we'll reach out once the review is cleared." "I'm sure you will," I replied. Then I stopped, looked back over my shoulder, and added, "Tell your executor. I keep copies." Outside, the heat hit me like truth. The sound of traffic blurred into a low hum. I walked slowly to my car, letting the moment settle. They thought they'd cornered me with their screens and permissions, but they forgot something. They erased my name from a screen, not from the law. I unlocked the car, placed the folder beside me, and sat in silence for a moment. The recorder still blinked red in my coat pocket. Proof. I replayed the short clip. The manager's voice came through crisp and nervous. Because the executor, Claire Hale, filed an order. That one line was enough. It wasn't anger I felt then. It was precision. Robert had left me blueprints. I was just following them. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped Martin Geller. His voicemail answered. "Martin, it's Lydia. Call me when you can. Something's wrong with Charleston Mutual, and I have the proof." I hung up, started the car, and pulled onto Meeting Street. Outside, the city looked unchanged. Pastel walls, white shutters, tourists with cameras. But to me, it all seemed sharper, like the world had tilted half a degree toward truth. Every betrayal leaves a paper trail. They'd just given me mine. The folder slid slightly on the seat as I turned the corner. Through the window, the sunlight caught the edge of Robert's seal. Bright, deliberate, indestructible. Somewhere in that reflection, I heard his calm voice again. "You don't need to fight loud, Lydia. Just make it official." The Ravenel Bridge rose before me like a silver spine cutting across the river. Wind pushed against the car windows, and sunlight flashed over the dashboard. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, steady, but my pulse wasn't. I pressed the call button on my dashboard. "Martin Geller," I said. The line clicked twice, then his familiar voice, calm, dry, steady. "Lydia, I was hoping I'd hear from you." "I found something," I said. Robert left an addendum in his own handwriting. The file was in a USB under the study floorboard. Silence stretched, then a quiet chuckle. "So you found what Robert left you?" "Yes," I said. "And Ethan doesn't know yet." "Good," Martin replied. "Come in. Bring everything." His office, Geller and Sons, sat on East Bay Street. Brick walls, framed certificates, the same smell of old paper and coffee that never left. He greeted me with that measured nod lawyers have when they already suspect what's coming. "Let's see what you've got," he said. I placed the USB on his desk. He plugged it into his computer, the monitor glowing against the room's wooden panels. The file opened. Estate Final Draft.pdf. Robert's signature flowed across the bottom like a familiar echo. Slow, deliberate, unmistakably his. Martin adjusted his glasses, leaned close to the screen. "That's Robert's hand," he said softly. "I'd recognize it anywhere." He clicked zoom in. 2 other names appeared beneath. "2 witnesses," he read aloud. "Emily Shaw, Robert's assistant, and Nora Price, our notary accountant." He looked at me. "Both valid, both still with us." "So it's real?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Signed and notarized 3 days before he passed. Lydia, this is the final version, not the one Ethan filed." I felt something shift. Not surprise, but confirmation. "I knew he'd cover his tracks," I murmured. Martin leaned back, tapping his pen on the desk. "They filed the outdated draft first," he said. "That's how Ethan got temporary control, but this addendum overrides it, legally and chronologically." "Chronologically," I repeated. He smiled. "Exactly. Dates are everything in probate." He turned the monitor toward me. "See here? Metadata shows it was last edited at 10:42 p.m., 3 nights before Robert's heart attack. That's a digital timestamp. Immutable." "Meaning?" "Meaning once we extract the metadata and authenticate the signatures, no court will ignore it." I sat back in my chair. Outside, sunlight bounced off the window blinds, flickering across the polished floor, like Morse code. Robert's light, his way of speaking without words. Martin's voice brought me back. "You'll need that metadata officially certified. Chain of custody, Lydia. Every byte accounted for." "And Ethan?" "He'll argue fraud. They always do. But if you keep that USB sealed until we file, he won't have a leg to stand on." I smiled faintly. "Then I'll get it." He studied me. "You're calmer than I expected." "I've had practice," Martin chuckled. "You sound like him." "Maybe I learned from the best." He printed the file and slid it across the desk. The seal mark at the bottom shimmered under the light. "I'll keep a copy," he said, "but this stays in your possession until we notarize the chain. Don't email it. Don't cloud it. Keep it physical." "I understand." He paused. "Lydia, this isn't just a correction of paperwork. It's a legal reversal. Once filed, it nullifies Ethan's executor claim entirely." I looked at the page again. Robert's pen strokes looping like tides. Every word seemed deliberate, final, protective. Martin said quietly, "He must have known they'd try something." "He always did," I said. "He told me once, if they rush you out, follow the ink." Martin nodded. "He left you a trail. And I'm following it." He smiled, faint but proud. "Then we do this right, step by step, no noise, just process." When I left the office, the late afternoon light hit the brass plaque outside. Geller and Sons, attorneys at law. The reflection caught my eyes. Calm, unbroken. I walked toward my car, the USB in my hand, its metal edge warm from the sun. In the distance, the bridge shimmered again across the harbor. Robert's voice echoed somewhere in memory. "Truth is light, Lydia. You just have to hold it steady." I whispered back, "I will." Then I started the engine. The road ahead stretched toward the courthouse district, and I already knew my next call, to confirm with the notary, Nora Price. The next morning, the air over Charleston smelled like rain on steel. I pressed my beige coat smooth, slipped Robert's leather case under my arm, and walked through the revolving glass doors of Hale Investments. The lobby was marble, cold, echoing. Every step of my heels carried farther than it should. At the front desk, a young assistant looked up from her monitor. "I'm here to drop the Fairchild Trust papers," I said, voice even. She blinked, scanning the schedule. "Mr. Hale's not in today, ma'am." "That's fine," I replied. "He'll know what this is." I placed the sealed envelope on the counter, letting the embossed crest face upward. The girl nodded politely, typing something into her computer. Behind her, the glass doors to the executive wing were half closed. Light spilled through, catching the edge of a stack of printouts near the copier. One sheet had slipped to the floor. I bent down, slowly, deliberately. "Looks like someone dropped a page," I said. She smiled, distracted. "Oh, thank you." But the paper wasn't ordinary. My eyes caught the bold heading, Trust Freeze Authorization. Beneath it, in a hurried penstroke, 3 words cut through the text. Canceled by E.H. Ethan Hale. The initials hung there like fingerprints. I folded the page once, neatly, and slid it beneath my own folder as I straightened. "Tell him I stopped by," I said softly. "Mrs. Fairchild, not out." The assistant nodded again, unaware of what had just changed hands. As I walked toward the elevator, the page pressed between documents. I could feel the heat of it through the folder. Outside, rain started to fall against the glass facade, soft and rhythmic. I paused beneath the overhang and looked back. The company logo shimmered across the marble floor, fractured by water. "He left his crime on the floor," I whispered. In the car, I pulled the fax free. The header showed a timestamp, 2 days after Robert's death. Ethan had canceled the trust freeze himself, posing as executor before the court had even reviewed the estate. Forgery on paper. Fraud in ink. I turned the sheet over. There was a faint smudge of his pen near the corner, something only a careless man leaves behind when he believes no one's watching. Robert would have called it poetic. The phone on the seat buzzed. A message from Martin. "Keep copies, Lydia. Every detail counts." I smiled, already ahead of him. I took a quick photo of the fax, saved it to an encrypted folder, then tucked the original into the same envelope that had once carried the fake tax papers. Different cargo now. Truth. Traffic rolled past on East Bay Street, horns blending with the rain. Each sound felt sharper, more deliberate, like punctuation. By the time I reached the bridge, the storm had thinned to mist. The fax lay beside me on the passenger seat, edges curling slightly in the humidity. Canceled by E.H. He hadn't just frozen my accounts, he'd left a trail of proof big enough to choke on. I breathed once, steady and measured. Robert used to say, "The arrogant write their confessions before they know it." The house was silent when I returned. Even the air felt still, like it was holding its breath. Robert's old study waited at the end of the hall, mahogany door, brass handle, the faint smell of ink and cedar still there. I turned on the desk lamp. The yellow light spread slowly across the room, touching his papers, his pen tray, the old fax machine sitting in the corner like a sleeping witness. It hadn't been used in years, but the cord was still plugged in. Robert never threw out what he trusted once. I powered it on. The machine whirred, coughing once before the light blinked green. On the small digital screen, a line appeared. Archive fax log. I typed the code from the page I'd found earlier, the one marked "Cancelled by EH." The screen paused, then printed a faint list of transmissions. 0311, EH. Trust freeze authorization. 9:42 p.m. The date stopped me. 2 days before Robert's death. I pressed reprint. Paper slid out slowly, line by line, the way truth sometimes does, reluctant but steady. The document was the same form I'd seen at Hale Investments, but this one bore a shaky signature at the bottom. Robert Fairchild, written too fast, the ink heavier on the downward stroke. I fetched one of Robert's real contracts from the cabinet. His hand had always been calm, the loops precise, the letters breathing. This one looked nervous, rushed. Forgery has rhythm. His hand didn't. I laid both pages side by side under the lamp. The contrast was almost cruel. Robert's name, alive and deliberate. I took my phone and snapped a photo. The flash lit the entire room, bouncing off the brass frame above the desk. For a second, the reflection looked like sunlight, as if he were standing behind me, nodding. "He left me light and paper," I whispered. "Enough." The fax machine beeped again, one more transmission line appearing at the bottom of the log. 0312, Hale Investments, Reasend failed. Failed. He had tried twice. Ethan's impatience had given him away. He couldn't wait for legal processing, couldn't wait for witnesses. He had forged the form, sent it from this very room, and then left the evidence behind. The kind of arrogance that only men who think they own women's silence ever have. I connected the USB Robert had left me to the laptop and opened the original addendum again. Robert's true signature appeared, identical to the one on the notarized file. Then I placed the fax beside it. Even without software, the difference screamed. The R in the forgery cut inward, like a man trying to imitate confidence. Robert's real R opened outward, generous, assured. I held the 2 pages up to the lamp. The paper fibers glowed differently. One reflected, one absorbed. Fake ink has no depth. I scanned both sheets and attached the images in an email to Martin. Subject, proof by paper, found in Robert's study. Original fax transmission shows forged signature dated before death. Log code attached. LF. I hit send. The machine hummed again in the quiet room, the sound blending with rain against the window. Then nothing but the low click of cooling metal. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the desk. The world outside was still dark, but the light from the lamp carved a perfect circle around the 2 signatures. It looked almost ceremonial, truth and imitation facing each other, one shining, one fading. Robert used to say, "Paper doesn't lie, people do." Now I had both kinds in front of me. I placed the genuine signature on top, folded the forged fax beneath it, and slipped them into the same envelope as the photograph. When I sealed it, I felt the weight of it, not heavy, but solid. As I turned off the lamp, the last light hit the photo frame on the bookshelf, the one of Robert and me standing by the pier. The sea behind us was golden, the same color as this room now. "Good night, Robert," I said quietly. "Your light still works." The rain had already begun when I parked in front of Geller & Sons again. Thin lines ran down the window glass, blurring the letters of the brass plaque. Inside, the office smelled like coffee and dusted paper. Martin was standing by his desk when I entered, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. I didn't say a word. I laid the envelope on his desk. One by one, I spread the papers across the wood. The addendum, the fax logs, the photos, the 2 signatures glowing under the lamp's light. The sound of the pages filled the room, soft, deliberate, like rain hitting glass. Martin adjusted his glasses. He picked up the first fax, scanning it closely. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this?" "Robert's study," I said. "The fax logs are still stored in the machine, same code Ethan used." He exhaled, slow. "You always were thorough." He set the page down, turned to his laptop, and began typing. The screen's light reflected on the documents, a cold contrast to the lamp's gold. His fingers tapped a steady rhythm. Search, open, verify. Then he looked up. "Timestamp matches," he said. "The forged authorization came from that fax machine, 2 days before Robert's death. He couldn't have signed it." I leaned back in the chair. "So it's enough?" Martin didn't answer immediately. He clicked again, cross-checking metadata. Finally he said, "Enough to start, but not enough to finish." I frowned. "Meaning?" "If we file," he said, "we'll need both witnesses." "Emily and Nora Price," I repeated. He nodded. "Emily's still with my firm. She'll testify. Nora left last year, works with the accountant's office downtown. She notarized the real addendum. Her signature's right here." He pointed to the bottom of the PDF on the screen. The neat initials NP were embossed beside the seal. I studied them for a long moment. "Then we'll meet her." Martin smiled faintly. "I thought you'd say that." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small beige card. "Before you do," he said, "you'll need this." It was a business card, crisp, heavy stock, the kind Robert would have admired. Amelia Rhodes, attorney at law. "She doesn't scare easy," Martin said. "Probate litigation, clean record, sharp as a scalpel. She'll know how to move this fast." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the river. Rain slid down the wide window behind him, cutting the city lights into streaks. Martin's voice softened. "You know this won't be quiet, Lydia. Ethan will fight, and Claire—" "She already chose her side," I said. "Now I'm choosing mine." He gave a small nod, not of pity, of respect. "Then let's make it official." He turned the lamp toward the table, and the reflection framed both of us in its light. Mentor and widow, law and resolve. He clicked print. The sound of the printer hummed steady and sure. When the papers came out, he signed his initials at the bottom and pushed them toward me. "Chain of custody, sealed copy," he said. "For the record." I slipped them carefully into the folder beside the fax evidence. The rain grew heavier, tapping louder against the glass. Martin looked at me one last time. "I've known you a long time, Lydia. Robert trusted you with everything that mattered. Don't lose yourself in the fight." "I won't," I said. "I'm done losing." He smiled again, the quiet kind that hides both worry and pride. "Then go find Nora. The sooner she signs her affidavit, the better." I rose, gathered the documents, and looked out the window. The streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement, the reflections splitting into 1,000 small circles. Through the rain, everything looked cleaner, sharper. "No more silence," I whispered. Martin didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded once and said, "I'll have Amelia waiting." I turned toward the door, folder under my arm. The hinges creaked, the same sound they'd made the day Robert brought me here years ago. When I stepped outside, the rain hit the sidewalk in a fine mist. I stood for a moment under the awning, letting the water cool my face. Somewhere behind me, Martin's window light glowed warm against the storm. For the first time since this began, I felt steady. The war wasn't at the reading anymore. It had moved to paper, to dates, to names, and this time, I had all three. I pulled the hood of my coat over my hair and walked into the rain, the card of Amelia Rhodes in my pocket, the echo of Martin's words following behind me like a vow. The next day, the rain had cleared, leaving the streets of Savannah washed and shining. I parked by a row of magnolia trees and climbed the steps to a narrow brick building with brass lettering, Rhodes and Klein, Attorneys at Law. Inside, the air smelled of paper and fresh coffee. White light poured down from skylights, glinting off the spines of law books that climbed the walls. Behind a long desk sat a young woman with dark hair tied neatly back, tapping something into her laptop. "Mrs. Fairchild?" she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was steady, her voice direct. "Amelia Rhodes." I liked her immediately. We sat across from each other in a glass-topped office. No paintings, no ornaments, just order. I placed the folder on her desk and slid the USB toward her. "This contains Robert's final addendum," I said, "and proof that Ethan forged a fax to freeze the trust." She raised an eyebrow but didn't speak, just inserted the USB into a port on a small silver computer. The machine hummed to life, its fan a low mechanical whisper. Amelia's fingers moved quickly, opening files, running diagnostics. "The addendum file," she murmured. "Last modified 3 days before your husband's death. Digital signature verified. No later edits." She turned the screen toward me. On the display, the timestamp glowed steady and clean. 10:42 p.m., March 11th. The same night Robert had signed his last letter. Amelia looked up. "You have a case, Mrs. Fairchild. A strong one." I let the words settle. They felt like oxygen. She kept typing. Then she frowned. "Hold on." "What is it?" "There's an embedded folder inside the drive. Hidden metadata chain." She clicked deeper. The screen flashed, and a series of file names appeared, short, coded. At the top, emails, EH2, CH, draft, PDF. She opened one. Text filled the screen. "Claire, just sign it. Martin won't check dates. If she asks, say it was Dad's version." EH. The room went very still. Amelia looked at me. "EH. Ethan Hale?" I nodded slowly. Her jaw tightened. "He coerced his wife to falsify signatures. That's criminal, not just civil." She printed the email chain, page after page, sliding out of the laser printer in a rhythm like a heartbeat. When the last page dropped, she said quietly, "Probate fraud petition. That's our next move." I met her eyes. "How long will it take?" "As long as it takes," she said, "to make them tell the truth." We reviewed everything again. Amelia highlighted the dates, cross-checked the metadata with the notarization log I'd brought from Martin. She created a timeline on legal pad paper, Robert's signature, the fake fax, Ethan's transaction, the email chain. Each line closed the circle tighter. When she finished, she leaned back, the confidence of someone who knew how to fight cleanly. "Mrs. Fairchild," she said, "we file within 48 hours. Once the clerk accepts it, Ethan loses control of the trust until the investigation concludes." I stared at the stack of pages between us. The proof, the lies, the light. For months, silence had been my only defense. Now, it was evidence that spoke louder than I ever could. Amelia smiled faintly. "You've done half my job already." "I had good teachers," I said. "Robert and Martin." Her expression softened. "They raised a strategist." The printer stopped. The room quieted again. Outside the window, Savannah's streets glowed white with noon light. Amelia gathered the papers into a neat pile and slid them into a red folder stamped "Probate Fraud Petition, Preliminary." "Take this copy," she said. "Keep it somewhere private. Don't trust email, don't trust Claire's line. I'll handle all filings directly through the clerk." I nodded. "Understood." She stood, offered her hand again. It was the same firm grip, but now there was something else. Respect. "You've been fighting this alone too long," she said. "You're not alone anymore." I left the office feeling the weight of the folder against my palm. It didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. As I stepped outside, a gust of warm air swept down the street, rattling the magnolia leaves. The courthouse tower shimmered at the end of the block. For the first time since Robert's passing, I wasn't walking into silence. I was walking into a plan. Downtown Savannah buzzed with midday traffic, sunlight flashing off glass towers, and the steady hum of engines. Amelia parked beside a gray office complex marked Grant and Price Accounting. She turned to me. Nora works here. She's the one who notarized Robert's addendum. Will she talk? I asked. Amelia's eyes narrowed slightly. We'll find out. The lobby was cold, all chrome and air conditioning. A security guard looked up from his desk. Appointments only, he said. Amelia slid her bar card across the counter. Attorney Rhodes, representing Mrs. Lydia Fairchild. We're here for Ms. Nora Price, witness in a pending probate case. The guard frowned, made a call, then finally buzzed us through. On the 5th floor, the hallway smelled faintly of printer toner and burnt coffee. An office door read, N. Price, accounting associate. Amelia knocked once. A woman's voice inside. Come in? Nora Price sat behind her desk, papers stacked in uneasy towers. She was in her 40s, pale from fluorescent light, fingers trembling around a cup of coffee. Her eyes flicked from Amelia's badge to my face, then back again. I already told Mr. Hale everything I know, she said quickly. Amelia's voice stayed calm. We're not here on his behalf. Nora's lips parted, confusion breaking through the fear. I stepped forward. You signed Robert Fairchild's final addendum 3 days before he passed. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Yes, she whispered. At his house. He said he wanted it filed before the weekend. Did you notarize it? I did. He looked tired but clear. He thanked me for coming so late. Amelia exchanged a glance with me. We just need you to confirm that, in writing. Nora shook her head sharply. I can't. Ethan came here the week after. He told me to destroy the notes and sign a replacement copy. Her voice cracked. He said it was just a clarification, but it wasn't. The date was changed. The room went silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. Amelia leaned forward, her tone gentler. Nora, did he threaten you? Nora hesitated. Not threaten. He offered money. How much? Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to us. 5,000, cash, to stay quiet. Amelia reached into her briefcase and took out her phone. She set it on the desk, face down, already recording. Would you mind repeating that? Nora looked at her, then at me. Her hand shook slightly as she placed the coffee down. He offered me 5,000 to stay quiet, she said again, louder this time, as if forcing the words out of her chest. The air felt heavier after she said it. Amelia flipped the phone, locked the recording, and slipped it back into her bag. Thank you, she said. You just turned this from a dispute into a fraud case. Nora pressed her palms flat on the desk. You don't understand. He'll know it was me. I do understand, Amelia said quietly. And we'll make sure you're protected. You can testify under confidentiality. The court can seal your name until trial. Nora's eyes darted between us. Will that really hold? It will if I file the motion myself, Amelia said. I've done this before. I moved closer, resting my hand lightly over Nora's. Her skin was cold, fingers tight with worry. Robert would thank you, I said. He trusted you to do the right thing. You already did once. You just have to do it again. For a moment, she said nothing. Then finally, she nodded. I'll do it, she whispered, but only if the court guarantees I won't be dragged into the news. Amelia smiled faintly. Then we'll file for witness anonymity under Section 18(7). It's not common, but it's clean. Outside the office, the hallway lights buzzed softly. We walked back toward the elevator, the silence between us no longer tense, just full. Amelia exhaled. That recording alone will force discovery. What happens next? I asked. We attach her affidavit to the petition, she said. The judge will issue an inquiry order. Ethan's attorneys won't see it coming. I nodded. Through the glass, the afternoon sun reflected off the city like polished steel. No more quiet, then, Amelia murmured. No more quiet, I repeated. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The courthouse clock struck 8 as Amelia and I stood before the marble steps of Charleston Superior Court. The air smelled of paper and wet stone. Inside, the clerk's counter gleamed under cold light. Amelia spread the documents across the marble surface. Probate fraud petition, Fairchild v. Hale. Every page bore the red seal of the firm, the evidence tabs marked with clean precision. The clerk took the folder, stamped the first page, and the sound echoed through the empty hall. Thud. That was the sound of war beginning quietly. We both signed beneath the affidavit line. Amelia's handwriting was firm. Mine shook, but I didn't hide it. She looked at me and said, "From now on, every word goes through the court, not through them." I nodded. It's about time someone else listened. The clerk gathered the pages and slid them into the tray marked "Filed." It was done. The law was in motion. Across town, Ethan Hale sat in his glass office at Hale Investments when the courier entered. "Delivery for you, Mr. Hale." He tore the envelope open. Inside, the official notice of petition, stamped in crimson ink. His jaw tightened. His assistant asked, "Everything all right, sir?" He didn't answer. He crushed the letter in his hand, then turned toward the window where reporters already gathered below. By afternoon, the networks had picked it up. The screen at my house flickered to life. Breaking. Investment heir accused in estate dispute by late partner's widow. Ethan stood before microphones outside his firm. Flashes popped like gunfire. "She's a confused old woman," he said, smiling for the cameras. "She's grieving. I wish her peace, but she's mistaken." A reporter shouted, "Is it true she found a second will?" Ethan blinked, too quickly. No comment. That blink gave him away. I stood in my living room, one hand on the remote, watching the man I had once trusted to call me mother speak lies into a microphone. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, the kind of cruelty that hides behind sympathy. He said, "She's holding documents she doesn't understand. The estate executor already confirmed everything." Amelia called. "Don't answer, Lydia. Let him talk himself into perjury." The broadcast cut to the anchor's commentary. Sources close to the Hale family say the widow has filed claims of forgery. Hale Investments denies wrongdoing. I muted the sound. On the screen, his mouth kept moving, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Silence was better. I stared at his face and felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just clarity. I turned off the television. The room fell into stillness. Only the lamp beside Robert's chair glowed softly, its light warming the papers Amelia had left on the table. I sat down, opened the folder again, and traced the embossed seal with my thumb. Under the words, "Probate Fraud Petition," my name was written clearly. "Plaintiff, Lydia Ann Fairchild." I whispered. I didn't answer. The court would. Later that evening, Amelia sent a message. Filed at 8:43 a.m., case number 22491C. Judge Harlan assigned. Media response expected. Ignore it. He already made his first mistake. I replied, "The blink?" She wrote back one word. "Exactly." The following morning, the paper ran his quote on the front page. "She's a confused old woman," but in smaller print below it, the journalist added, "In his statement, Mr. Hale referenced a will that has not yet been introduced in court." It was a single line, one sentence he couldn't take back, self-incrimination printed in black and white. I folded the newspaper and placed it under the petition file. Then I made tea, the way Robert used to. 2 spoons, no sugar. Through the kitchen window, the Charleston skyline looked sharp against the pale sky. For the first time in months, I felt the faint taste of victory. Not loud, not public, but real. The kind that begins quietly, on paper, under seal. The printer hummed. A single page slid out, fresh ink, black and sharp. Amelia leaned closer to the screen. "Transfer. Hale account, number 1298. Her voice was steady, but her hand paused on the mouse. I looked at the date. 2 days after his funeral. Amelia's eyes narrowed. That's the nail. The transaction memo read, "Trust escrow adjustment." No signature, no authorization letter. Robert was already gone. Amelia printed the log, pinned it to a red folder marked Exhibit B. "Bank record will lead the case," she said. I nodded. "And lead him to himself." Across town, Ethan slammed the newspaper onto his desk. The headline read, "Probate Fraud Inquiry Expands." His lawyer adjusted his tie. "They've subpoenaed Hale Investments. You can file a defamation counterclaim, stall discovery." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Do it. If she wants a fight, I'll give her one she can't afford." He turned toward the window, the glass reflecting his clenched hand. Back in Amelia's office, the light was low and warm. She opened a second log from Charleston Mutual Bank. The cursor blinked against the data stream. "Authorization, C. Hale, E. Hale," she read. She zoomed in. "Executor signature, but look at the timestamp, March 15th, 10:17 a.m. Robert's death certificate said March 13th. She didn't look up. "You can't authorize from the grave." The printer clicked again. Each page carried another line of truth. Transfer confirmed, cleared March 15th. Amelia stacked the papers, clipped them neatly, and pressed the top corner flat. "If the bank doesn't release metadata, we file a second subpoena." I traced the red ink on the header. Every number felt like a heartbeat. "We're close," I said. Ethan's boardroom, cold, glass, sterile. He stood before his legal team. "They'll argue misuse of executor power," his lawyer said. Ethan smirked. "Call it executor compensation. They'll never prove motive." A junior associate hesitated. "The transfer was posthumous." Ethan's stare silenced him. "Then we stall." His reflection in the window looked smaller than before. Amelia laid 2 pages side by side on the desk. Left, Robert's authentic signature. Right, the forged executor order. "The pressure's wrong," she said. "Machine-printed overlay, not pen stroke." She circled the entry. "Executor compensation, textbook laundering term. They moved estate funds into a personal escrow." I said, "How long until we file?" She answered, "Tonight." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Each keystroke hit like a clock ticking. Supplemental Exhibit B, financial transaction, posthumous transfer. The printer started again. The pages fell in rhythm with the rain against the window. Amelia checked the first sheet, red-stamped it, and slid it toward me. Sequence proof, brick by brick. He was digging while I built. Light from the screen washed her face in blue. "Lydia, this closes his circle. Executor collusion, clear timeline, verified transfer. Judge will see fraud in a glance." I looked at the stack of documents, paper towers rising higher than his arrogance. "Robert left the path," I said. "We just followed it." Amelia smiled faintly. "And now we show the court where it leads." Outside, thunder rolled. Rain streaked down the office window. The last page printed, "Transfer, $200,000. Beneficiary, Ethan Hale. Memo, executor adjustment." Amelia stamped the top copy. Thud. "Filed in 30 minutes, she said. "Then he answers to it." At Hale Investments, a phone rang. His lawyer answered, listened, then looked straight at Ethan. "They found the transfer." Ethan leaned back, forcing a laugh. "Then it's time to remind them how loud money speaks." In Amelia's office, silence. The lamp glowed gold over the signed petition. I closed my eyes. Robert's words drifted back. "If they rush you out, follow the ink." When I opened them, the red line of the transfer glowed like a trail through darkness. The Charleston County Courthouse smelled of polish and paper. Light poured through the tall windows, cutting the room into white and shadow. I sat behind Amelia, my hands folded on my lap, the addendums sealed in a blue folder. Across the aisle, Ethan leaned back, his tie perfectly knotted, his smile thin. He thought this was theater. He didn't know the script had already changed. The bailiff's voice broke the silence. "All rise." The judge entered, calm, deliberate, eyes heavy with patience. We stood. Case number 22491C, Fairchild versus Hale. When she nodded for us to sit, Amelia rose again immediately. She placed the addendum on the table and said, "Your Honor, we present Exhibit A, the verified addendum signed by Robert Fairchild 3 days prior to his death." The judge adjusted her glasses. "Noted." Amelia continued, steady and clear. "The witness, Nora Price, will testify that the decedent signed this document in her presence under oath and with 2 witnesses as required by Georgia probate law. The name cut through the air. Ethan's jaw moved. He hadn't expected her to show up. The door opened. 2 deputies escorted Nora Price to the stand. Her hair was tied back, her hands trembling slightly as she held the Bible. She swore in, her voice small but clear. Amelia stepped closer. "Ms. Price, do you recognize this document?" "Yes," Nora said. "That's Robert Fairchild's signature. He signed in front of me and his assistant Emily 3 days before he passed." Ethan's chair creaked. Amelia nodded. "Did anyone approach you afterward concerning this document?" Nora hesitated, looked at the judge, then back at Amelia. "Yes. Mr. Hale came to my office the next week. He asked me to sign another version. It was already printed. My name was on it, but the date was changed." The courtroom fell silent. Even the microphones seemed to hum quieter. Amelia's tone didn't waver. "Did you sign it?" "No." Her voice cracked slightly. "He offered me $5,000 to stay quiet." Ethan shot up. "That's a lie!" The judge raised her hand. "Mr. Hale, you'll have your turn." Amelia walked back to our table, opened the folder, and took out the fax copy. "Your Honor, Exhibit B, a forged freeze authorization signed March 15th, 2 days after the decedent's funeral. The executor order was processed by Mr. Hale's office." Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "I handled the forms myself!" The courtroom gasped. Amelia didn't even blink. "That will be noted in the transcript." The judge's gavel struck once. "Mr. Hale, you are to remain seated. Counsel, continue." Ethan's lawyer whispered something in his ear, face pale. Ethan didn't hear. He was staring at me. For the first time, he didn't look powerful, just exposed. Amelia turned to Nora. "Ms. Price, are you under any current employment with Hale Investments?" "No," she said softly. "I resigned last month. I couldn't keep it secret anymore." Amelia smiled, a quiet thank you in her eyes. No further questions. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, your statement a moment ago, I handled the forms myself. Do you wish to clarify?" His lawyer interjected. "Your Honor, my client meant he reviewed the documents, not prepared them." The judge raised a hand. "Clarify for the record, Mr. Hale." Ethan's mouth opened, then shut again. The pause said more than any answer could. The judge nodded slowly. "We'll take a brief recess." The bailiff announced. "All rise." Chairs scraped. People whispered. Ethan sank into his seat, his hands gripping the table. Nora stepped down, escorted gently by the deputies. Amelia closed the folder and exhaled. I turned to her. She met my eyes. The smallest smile appeared. Her voice was calm when she spoke. "The court recognizes Mr. Hale's statement as an admission of fraud under Georgia probate law, section 16-8-2. Each word landed like a hammer. Ethan froze. His lawyer turned to him, whispering fast, but the judge's eyes didn't move. "The addendum of the late Robert Fairchild is therefore upheld, pending full verification of witnesses. The estate remains under temporary injunction until final ruling." She raised her gavel. One more thud. The echo rolled through the hall. Long, final, undeniable. Claire's hand trembled. She tried to reach for Ethan, but stopped halfway. Her eyes filled, her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since the will reading, she looked at me and didn't look away. Ethan turned on her. "She twisted it all. You know it." His voice cracked louder than the gavel. The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his shoulder. The judge didn't even glance up. "Mr. Hale, any further outburst and you'll be removed." He sank back, shaking his head, lips moving soundlessly. Amelia gathered the documents with quiet precision. Martin stood beside me, his hand steady on my arm. "You all right?" he whispered. I nodded once. I waited long enough to hear it said aloud. Across the aisle, Ethan's lawyer was packing his briefcase. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and spoke softly but clearly. "Your Honor, for the record, I'm withdrawing as counsel for Mr. Hale, effective immediately." The judge nodded. "Noted." The air shifted. white light softening to gold, the hum of fluorescent bulbs mixed with the low shuffle of papers and footsteps. Someone exhaled, long and shaky. The storm had spent itself. I rose slowly. My chair made a sound sharp enough to turn a few heads. I didn't look back at Ethan. He was no longer the man who'd smirked through my husband's will. Claire's tears fell silently onto the table. Amelia stopped beside her, placed a single card. No words, just a gesture. "Should you ever need clarity," she said quietly, "call." Claire nodded through tears, clutching the card like a lifeline. Ethan's hands gripped the table's edge until his knuckles turned white. He stared at the floor as if it could open and swallow him whole. Martin held the door for me. The hallway beyond glowed with the afternoon sun. For a second, I stopped, letting the warmth touch my face. Behind us, the judge's gavel struck one last time, echoing faintly through the corridor. The courthouse steps had become a stage. Flashes burst like lightning in daylight. Microphones swung toward every sound. Reporters called my name as if it belonged to them. "Mrs. Fairchild, how do you feel about the verdict? Did you expect Mr. Hale's confession? Are you seeking further compensation?" The air was a wall of questions. None of them deserved an answer. Ethan appeared in the distance, flanked by 2 deputies. The cameras turned. Flashes followed him down the stairs. The click-click of humiliation. He tried to shield his face, shouting something about false narrative, but the microphones caught only static and anger. The screen on a cameraman's monitor replayed his outburst inside the courtroom. That single moment. I handled the forms myself, now looped across every channel. Amelia stepped forward, calm amid the frenzy. She handed a folded sheet to the nearest reporter. Her voice cut through the noise, steady, precise. "No interviews. Only truth in records." The sentence hit like a gavel. The crowd quieted for a beat, just long enough for the message to settle. A journalist tried again, softer this time. "Mrs. Fairchild, will you say anything for your husband's memory?" I looked at him, then at the sheet Amelia had just given out. That was my answer. We moved through the crowd slowly. The rain began, light, fine, almost invisible until it touched the lenses. Flash met raindrop. Every spark of light scattered into mist. Amelia opened the car door. Outside, microphones pressed against the glass, but their words blurred into a hum. Cameras caught only my reflection, framed by rain and silence. Inside the car, the radio murmured a news anchor's voice. Mrs. Fairchild declined interviews, issuing only a written statement emphasizing the validity of court records and the decedent's verified addendum. Sources confirm further review of the Fairchild Trust Clause 12, earmarked for community donations. Amelia smiled faintly. Clause 12. He planned that quietly. I nodded. Robert always built with others in mind. The driver pulled away from the courthouse. Rain streaked down the windshield, each line dividing the city lights into soft gold threads. I watched the courthouse grow smaller in the mirror, a shape of marble and memory fading into the wet evening. The phone in Amelia's lap buzzed, a notification from the Charleston Herald. The headline glowed on the screen. Fairchild Trust includes $1 million endowment to community college. She turned the phone toward me. I smiled. Claire stood there, drenched to her shoulders, hair clinging to her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Mom," she said finally, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I was blind." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for something she couldn't yet name. I stepped aside. "Come in. The rain doesn't forgive cold." She hesitated, then crossed the threshold like someone walking back into memory. The air inside carried the scent of old books and chamomile. I poured 2 cups of tea, set them on the veranda table. She sat opposite me, the sound of rain filling the quiet between us. "Blindness," I said, stirring my cup slowly, "is forgiven. Greed is not." She swallowed hard, hands cupped around the steam. "I know. I thought I was protecting Ethan. Or maybe myself. But I was protecting the wrong things." The porch light flickered in the wind. Drops slid down the wooden columns like tears too tired to fall. She reached into her coat pocket and placed her wedding ring on the table. "It's over," she whispered. "He's gone, and I don't even know where to start making it right." I looked at the ring, then at her face. No makeup, no defenses, just the daughter I once knew. "You start," I said, "by understanding what you almost lost." I rose and walked to the cabinet near the door. Inside was a small envelope, cream paper, sealed in wax, Robert's handwriting on the front. I'd kept it untouched since the day he passed. When I returned, Claire's eyes followed it as though it might burn. I set it on the table. "Your father left this for you," I said quietly, "for the day you learned what it means." She hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a photograph, the three of us at Tybee Beach years ago. Robert's arm around her shoulders, her laugh frozen midair. Beneath it, a single check, $25,000 made out to the Robert Fairchild Foundation, Community Scholarship Fund. Her breath caught. He wanted me to give it away?" I nodded. "He wanted you to remember that worth isn't measured by what you keep." For a long time, she said nothing, just held the photo between her fingers, tracing the curve of her younger smile. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not closing the door." I glanced toward the rain. It was never locked, just waiting to be knocked on. The rain eased into a mist. Steam curled from our cups. Somewhere inside, the grandfather clock chimed 7. Claire rose, clutching the envelope to her chest. She leaned in, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. And I let her. She turned toward the door. Before leaving, she looked back once. The porch light caught her face, softer, calmer, older. "Good night, Mom," she said. I smiled faintly. "Good night, Claire." The news broke at noon. A banner slid across the screen. Ethan Hale arrested for probate fraud. Footage rolled. Ethan in a gray suit, handcuffed, eyes hollow. The once proud smile replaced by something raw, unfinished. Reporters shouted his name. He didn't look up. The anchor's voice carried no sympathy. Following weeks of investigation, Hale Investments faces suspension of all operations. Mr. Hale is charged with falsification of legal documents and misappropriation of trust funds. A clip followed. Security guards escorting him out of his own glass building. Rain streaked the camera lens, the same rain that had once softened my porch light. I sat on the sofa, remote in hand. The screen flickered, blue, then black. Silence filled the room. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden. Somewhere outside, wind moved the chimes Robert had hung years ago. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just watched the reflection of the empty screen on the window pane, my face overlapping the ghost of his downfall. The phone rang. Martin's voice came through, low and sure. "It's over." His words hung there, suspended between relief and sorrow. "I know," I said. "Claire?" "She filed this morning," he replied. "Divorce petition and full renunciation of executor rights." I closed my eyes. Good. Let her start again. Outside, the afternoon light softened into amber. The wind slipped through the open window, stirring the curtains gently, like breath returning after a long hold. The house felt bigger than before, every sound distinct, every silence earned. On the coffee table lay a stack of newspapers. The top one showed a photo of Ethan beside the courthouse gates. The headline read, "Hale indicted, Fairchild estate cleared." I traced the print with my fingertip, then folded the paper neatly and slid it under the tray. Not as a trophy, just to keep things in order. The phone buzzed again, this time a message from Amelia. "Judgment to be finalized next week. You can rest now." I typed back only 2 words. "Thank you." Then I placed the phone face down and looked toward the window. The sun had dropped low, painting the sky in the same hue Robert loved, that fleeting line between gold and dusk. The garden below shimmered faintly after rain. A single leaf spiraled down, landed quietly on the path, and stayed there, perfectly still. The morning light in Charleston carried a quiet brightness. The conference table gleamed, white marble, polished to reflection. A stack of legal papers waited before me, each page embossed with a seal that shimmered faintly under the sun. Amelia stood at my right, Martin at my left. The notary raised his pen. I reached for mine. The final signature read, Lydia Fairchild, Founder, Fairchild Foundation for Integrity. The sound of pen against paper was steady, deliberate, a single line closing one story and opening another. Cameras clicked softly in the background. No chaos this time, no noise, only the respectful hum of a moment becoming public. A reporter near the front cleared her throat. Mrs. Fairchild, she asked, why name it Integrity? I looked at her, a young woman, maybe the age Claire had been when she first left home. I smiled. Because Paasa, I said. It's the only thing money can't buy. The room fell still for a beat. Even the clicking stopped. Amelia's eyes met mine, proud yet quiet. She'd drafted every clause, every safeguard, every scholarship term, $12 million from the trust, converted into endowments for law students studying ethics and public interest law. It's all transferred, she whispered. The foundation's live. Martin nodded. Robert would have liked this. I felt the words settle somewhere deep, like an anchor touching seabed. He built for tomorrow, I said softly. I'm just finishing his design. When the signing ended, we stepped outside. The Charleston air was warm and faintly salted from the sea. Flashbulbs popped once more, then faded into the background of gulls and wind. I didn't give a statement. I didn't need to. Every answer was written already, on paper, in stone, in choice. Later that afternoon, we drove toward Tybee. The coastline stretched endless, the horizon wide enough for peace to finally rest in. Waves folded against one another like pages closing. The color of the water matched the ink I'd used that morning, deep, precise, unregretful. Amelia sat beside me, reviewing board documents. I glanced at her binder. The last page bore a new heading, Board of Trustees. Underneath, her name. You didn't tell me, she said, eyes widening. You earned it, I replied. This foundation needs hands that understand both law and heart. We stopped near the pier where Robert once fished at dawn. The breeze lifted the corners of the papers in Amelia's lap. I held them down gently. The sea had its own language, steady, impartial. Everything we'd fought through, every courtroom word and headline, all of it now washed clean by the tide's rhythm. I watched the water move in gold light, felt the salt on my lips, and thought of what Robert used to say. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. When the sun dipped, the sky turned to amber. I took one last look at the folder marked Fairchild Foundation for Integrity. $12 million. Turned from defense into purpose, from storm into light. Amelia closed her binder. Ready to head back? In a minute, I said. The waves glimmered one last time against the pier. I let the wind move through my hair and breathed in the salt air. No vengeance, no noise, only peace. I had fought for truth. Now I wanted to build with it. The road curved along the coastline like a line drawn by memory. The sea shimmered on my left. Blue, endless, familiar. I drove with the window slightly open, the wind carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. Tybee Island. Our home once lost, now found. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no voices, just the rhythmic pulse of waves meeting sand. The iron gate appeared at the bend, framed by bougainvillea in full bloom. Their petals brushed against the bars as the gate creaked open. Slow, deliberate, like an old friend recognizing me. The gravel under the tires sounded the same as it had years ago. Back then, Robert would whistle when we arrived. I could almost hear it now, fading with the tide. The house stood tall again, painted cream, windows wide open to the light. Where the roof had once leaked, sunlight now poured through restored beams. Curtains moved softly with the breeze, breathing in and out like lungs rediscovering air. I stepped out of the car. The porch board still carried that faint echo when walked upon. Inside, the floor was cool, and the scent of cedar lingered from the carpenters who had finished months before. On the table near the window, a photo frame waited. Robert's face, kind, amused, a glint of sawdust on his cheek. A thin film of dust veiled it, delicate as memory itself. I picked up a small cloth from the drawer and wiped it clean. The glass caught the sunset, scattering gold across his smile. "Hello again," I whispered. Next to the frame lay his old leather notebook. Edges softened, corners bent, the smell of oil and paper still alive. I ran my hand over the cover, then opened it to the middle. Between sketches of walls and beams, a line in his handwriting: "If truth survives us, it will build again." The words sank deep, not heavy, but grounding. I sat by the window with the notebook on my lap. Outside, gulls circled above the tide. The horizon was painted in amber and lilac, the same colors that filled our first evening here. Robert built with bricks. I thought of how many nights he had worked by lantern light, his fingers tracing blueprints and hope at once. I smiled faintly. "He built with bricks," I murmured, "and I build with lessons." The light shifted as the sun lowered. It fell across the photo, the notebook, and the small silver key resting beside them, the one he'd once kept on his chain. I reached out, turned it in my fingers. The metal was warm, as if it remembered every door it had ever opened. The wind slipped through the open window, bringing in the sound of waves and faint laughter from the beach beyond. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened. We build homes not to own walls, but to hold memories. A soft breath escaped me. Neither grief nor relief, something gentler, the kind of exhale that happens when the heart stops bracing. I stood, placed the photo upright, the notebook beside it, the key resting atop both. The golden light wrapped around everything, the walls, the sea, even the air. For the first time, the house didn't feel haunted by loss. It felt lived in, by truth, by time, by peace. Outside, the tide rolled higher, washing over the footprints near the dunes. The sky deepened into that quiet blue that comes only once a day, when day still remembers light and night hasn't claimed it yet. I leaned against the porch railing, watching it fade. Some storms destroy, yes, but some clear the view. The wind moved through the bougainvillea again, scattering petals like blessings across the steps. I let one fall into my palm, its color bright against my skin. Robert's line echoed in my mind: "If truth survives us, it will build again." If you're hearing this story, I'd like to ask you, where are you watching from? And have you ever wondered, what might happen if one day you chose yourself too?